20 quotes and quips. Hey guys, Culture here. Today we're going to look at 20 quotes and quips. More specifically, we'll provide our interpretation of the quotes and what they mean to us, but of course, feel free to make your own interpretation. These are words spoken by some of the most intelligent touchstones of their respective generations. If we can glean some understanding of the human condition from their experiences and observations, then we'll be better for it. Whether you agree with these quotes is perhaps irrelevant. More important is to sympathize with their sentiment. Here are 20 quotes and quips. Before we go any further though, we want to let you all know how excited we are that today's episode is sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends. In case you haven't heard about it already, Raid Shadow Legends is a brand new mobile game taking the genre by storm. It's an engaging collection RPG game, amassing almost 10 million players across the globe in just 3 months. It's got everything you could possibly want in a game: a brilliant storyline, epic boss fights, strategy-based gameplay, and of course, as you can see, incredible graphics. What I really love about the game is you can play it for 5 minutes or 5 hours whenever, wherever you'd like. A lot of games with this much depth don't offer that much flexibility. And trust me, there's a lot of depth. There are hundreds of champions for you to collect and customize to your liking. My favorite of them is probably Garlic. I mean, he's like a badass orc. Look at him. He's awesome. By the way, there's no catch here either. This game is completely free to play. You can enjoy PvP battles in arena, PvE in dungeons, and of course, the insane boss fights. Raid Shadow Legends has earned itself a near perfect score on the Play Store too, and deservedly so. The game is rapidly growing and has just been boosted with the most recent update. Along with this, there's an amazing new loyalty program for new players. Get a new daily login reward for the first 90 days in the game. Yeah, the first 90 days. You can find us in the game under the name Culture Crash, and if you're quick enough, you can also join our clan that we'll be making soon. So what are you waiting for? Go to the video description, click on the special links, and you'll instantly get 50,000 silver and a free epic champion as part of the new player program to start your journey. Now let's delve into those quotes and quips. Better to light a candle than curse the darkness. William L. Watkinson, 1907. Instead, actively seek to improve them or work within their constraints. Take action instead of just complaining. If you choose not to decide, you've still made a choice. Neil Peart, 1980. Pretty self-explanatory. I call it action paralysis, the inability to make a decision because there are so many choices and factors to consider. If you allow yourself to be paralyzed by fear of the outcomes of your choice, then you have made a choice to do nothing, which is perhaps even worse. If you desire many things will seem but a few. Benjamin Franklin, 1736. The human need for more is insatiable. The more you have, the more you want. Instead, learn to appreciate what you already have, and when you want to improve, be selective with what you want to pursue. Authority without wisdom is like a heavy axe without an edge, fitter to bruise than polish. And Bradstreet, 1664. We need discipline, rules, and structure to form our society, to live and work together. But if the authority that creates these rules is unwise, it can do more harm than good. Personally, I think the message here is to understand why we have these rules, rather than just blindly enforcing and following them. We shape our buildings, and afterwards, our buildings shape us. Winston Churchill, 1943. I think of this in a couple of ways. Firstly, when we set out to create something, the end product is often so different that it says something about how we behave on the whole, rather than from moment to moment. Appreciation of that fact can lead us to better understand ourselves, give us a third-person perspective. Secondly, what we create shapes future generations, who look on creations that outlive their creators and learn from them. I'm not afraid of death, I just don't want to be there when it happens. Woody Allen, 1976. No explanation required. It is difficult for the isolated individual to work himself out of the immaturity which has become almost natural for him. Immanuel Kant, 1784. There's only so much that introspection and self-reflection can do for a person who is struggling. An outside perspective or helping hand can drag us out of our own minds. The greatest hazard in life is to risk nothing at all. Leo Buscaglia, 1982. To accomplish anything of real meaning requires risk. You have to take risks, to be brave in the face of rejection or ridicule, if you want to succeed and give meaning to your life. When a thing is funny, search it for a hidden truth. George Bernard Shaw, 1921. If something is funny, really funny, it usually speaks to some underlying thought or opinion. That's because it's relatable, and understanding which thoughts are relatable is what makes us social animals. Never interrupt your enemy when he is making a mistake. Napoleon Bonaparte, 1805. Of course, Napoleon was talking about wartime tactics. More generally, I think this quote is saying that when things are going your way, you should have the patience to let them come to fruition. Don't be the obstacle to your own success. Good judgment comes from experience, and experience usually comes from poor judgment. Fred Rose, 1932. We learn from our mistakes, and that means that when people make mistakes, they need to be given the chance to reflect on them and grow from that experience. Tolerance of mistakes allows people to mature and develop good judgment, which they can hopefully use for good purposes and also pass on to future generations. Advice is what we ask for when we already know the answer, but wish we didn't. Erica Jong, 1973. The hardest things to bring ourselves to do are often exactly what needs to be done. When we ask someone else for advice, we're either looking for validation of our decision or someone to give us an excuse not to do it. In either case, we need to have self-confidence and accountability to follow through with what we know is right regardless. The reasonable man adapts himself to the world. The unreasonable one persists in trying to adapt the world to himself. Therefore, all progress depends on the unreasonable man. George Bernard Shaw, 1903. One way to interpret this quote is fairly bleak, suggesting a kind of squeaky wheel gets the grease mentality that the world only changes by the actions of selfish complainers. But I prefer to think of it this way. The people who are considered abnormal, crazy, or radical are worth listening to. All revolutionaries started off as being unreasonable people, and only through the lens of history do we see their opinions and actions as being correct. Great men are rarely isolated mountain peaks. They are the summits of ranges. Thomas W. Higginson, 1942. No one achieves success by themselves. The greatest people are lifted up on the shoulders of others. They succeeded because they knew how to ask for help. And even at the top, there is a team of great people who they share their success with. So convenient a thing it is to be a reasonable creature, since it enables one to find or make a reason for everything one has a mind to do. Benjamin Franklin, 1771 to 1789. Because we're thinking creatures, it's very easy to rationalize our actions after the fact in a way that best suits us. Maybe that's to save our pride or to cover up our faults. We can delude ourselves with logic, but perhaps this quote is actually a positive thing. Maybe it's saying that with the benefit of rational thought, we can drive ourselves to achieve great things in the long term despite hardships in the short term. Either way, I think it's an awareness of our thought process and how that drives our actions that matters. Those who are ahead of their time often have to wait for it in uncomfortable quarters. Stanislav Lech, 1964. It's not easy being on the right side of history, but if you've truly reflected on your opinions and believe yourself to be correct, then you need to bear through the rejection. The weakest of all weak things is a virtue which has not been tested in the fire. Mark Twain, 1900. We can say anything we want. We conceive of how we think ourselves and others should act in certain situations. But if these beliefs haven't been tested through experience, if we haven't actually faced these situations, then our virtues are weak. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't have these virtues, but rather that they should be flexible to change, and that when we meet opposing virtues, we should be open to their merit. There is a great man who makes every man feel small, but the real great man is the man who makes every man feel great. Gilbert Keith Chesterton, 1906. When we think of great people, we may think of rulers of empires or countries that have power. This quote simply suggests that we shift our definition of great men to those people who raise other people's opinions of themselves, who when we interact with them, make us too feel empowered. Aren't people absurd? They never use the freedom they do have, but demand those they don't have. They have freedom of thought, they demand freedom of speech. Soren Kierkegaard, 1843. Before quarreling about your right to say what you want, first consider what it is you want to say. It's one thing to have freedom of speech, but quite another to use that freedom responsibly. It may be called the master passion, the hunger for self-approval. Mark Twain, 1906. More than ever, our need for validation is becoming externalized. Our social media profiles are littered with opinions and selfies, but all of this is a means to an end. We're aiming to be comfortable with ourselves, yet we seek that from others. Perhaps it's best to be comfortable with ourselves first, and then project that identity out into the world afterwards. Only you can know whether you are actually self-confident or merely posing. As an example, I'm not in any way sure that the opinions I've presented here today are absolute truths, but I do believe in them now, and they guide my actions for now. I'm willing to let them change if so required by my experience, or by rational discourse against them, but I can say with confidence that these views are ones I agree with, and my contentedness with that is my own form of self-approval. Hopefully by thinking over these quotes, you guys can also come up with clearer images of yourselves as well. See you all soon. If you enjoy what we do here at Culture Crash, please consider supporting the show via our Patreon, where we have a bunch of awesome rewards, or by checking out our online store. All links are in the description below.